Well, welcome. I'm Keith Reynolds, hosting the Breakfast with the Boss show. Our buddy Scott Tanker is out today, so I've elected I can't fill his shoes, but I've elected to come on for him. And today we have a great guest here. We have Michael Daigle. I said it right?
Correct.
He is an author. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
So I gotta tell you, I love. You know what? I don't. You know what? I read a little.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more like, well, wait till the movie comes out.
Okay.
But I've kind of looked over some of your material. Like I tell you, really interesting. You have three
Thank you.
books out there
Yes.
that you've done. But before we get into the books, let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
So, were you that kid that was always in the library when you were younger, or
Not really.
no?
I grew up all over the Northeast. My father was in the Navy, so
Okay.
all the kids in our family were born in different states.
Wow.
And four of us were born in different naval hospitals. The only one who managed to avoid that was my younger brother.
Okay.
And so we moved around a lot, and I worked in the Northeast in different states, for my whole career, and ended up in Jersey. But no, I was your average kid who played sports. Our family is musically creative, so I was one of the 38.7 million kids in 1965 who started
Absolutely.
a rock band, and we played. We weren't bad for a bunch of 14-year-olds. It worked pretty well.
Cool.
And then, but I've always been writing stuff, and started writing stories and scribbling things down. I started to write a story about a high school rock band that got a bus and was going to go on the road, and then the Partridge Family came on TV, and my career was over. That was the end of it. But then I started writing other stuff, and I wrote two novels by the time I was 24.
Really?
One of them was incorporated into this series. The other one is a semi-bad coming-of-age story that's still sitting in a folder somewhere that I'll get to eventually. I worked in various jobs in my early 30s, got into the newspaper business in Massachusetts, and I was home. I walked into this little newsroom at the Fairhaven Advocate, paper that had one computer, two typesetters, and an editor and me. But I knew instantly that I could do that. And I spent the next 35 years doing it in various newspapers. Went from there to run a weekly in Skowhegan, Maine, that had been marginal for 20 years. It was owned by a gentleman who had 5 other weeklies. He'd create a small company, and he could never make this paper work. When I walked in for the interview, he said basically, if you can't make this work, we're going to close it down in 6 weeks. And he hadn't really even offered me the job, but that was his lead-in. So I said, well, I got nothing to do for 6 months, so let's see what happens. We turned it around, we were breaking even, and then I went to another newspaper.
Wow.
Went to a daily in Waterville, stayed there for 7 years. And we, for a couple of those years, with the right combination of editors and reporters, were the best paper in the state. And we weren't the biggest by far, but we were the most aggressive. We had people who knew how to write, knew how to find stories. We had a managing editor who was the best political writer that I ever worked with, and he was a hands-off guy. He was a chain of command guy, so everybody had to do their jobs. Everybody had to learn their jobs, and he left us on our own. And he just said, come to me when you have ideas or when you run into something that I need to know about. And he would listen and offer suggestions and either kill a story or not kill a story. And it was a wonderful, good relationship, and it was fun to work there.
You know what? When I since owning this business and getting into this, I tell everybody this is your canvas, and that's a great approach, because I think you have to let people that are creative be creative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's how you have to let them do it.
And not every newspaper I worked at was exactly that way. There were the other papers I worked at were part of larger corporations, and there's a corporate setback, and there's the mindset and everything else. But at the Daily Record, when I was working there, again, we had this great combination of editors who were willing to take chances
Right.
and willing to trust the reporters to go do it. And we produced just good newspapers for a number of years, and it was the best job. You know, there's nothing you can say about the industry has changed completely.
Right.
I caution kids who talk about it now to understand that what I got into doesn't exist. It's a different ball game. It's remote. It's following tweets and emails and doing remote contact.
Right.
But there is an advantage to being sent out to a fire scene and having to dictate on deadline through your dying cell phone to an editor who's got 8 inches to get the story in the paper.
Right.
You want to learn how to tell stories? Do that 4 or 5 times.
Wow, that's, you're absolutely right. You know, now I got to ask you. You know, I know with creative people, you know, artists, they always have this, the block. They say the writer's block.
Yeah.
You ever come across that, and what do you do to get out of it?
The newspaper business cured me of writer's block.
Really?
You come into work every day expecting to write something.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not the lead story in the newspaper, it's going to be something where you have to translate somebody's experience through a typewriter or computer to have it make sense to the reader the next day. And it could be, I mean, there were days around holidays and things like that where government wasn't in session and schools were out and nobody was blowing up houses and things like that. You get these dry spells where you have to go create news. And sometimes, literally, you would spend a day typing press releases into news. But
Wow.
the fact is that you were at a machine and you were typing and thinking about words and how to create it. And you came into work expecting to write. You didn't, and you want to get over writer's block, come back from a meeting that ran late where they decided to like rezone the entire town. Your editor has 10 inches, which is about 800 words, and you have 15 minutes to write it. You
Wow.
sit down and you jam it through the machine. The other advantages that I learned is you learn how to listen. My end of my career at the Daily Record, I talked the editor into letting me do a column where I talked to one person about what they did, and we were looking for regular people who were doing sort of extraordinary things or even just ordinary things, but had a way of going about it. You learn to listen, and I would tape them because after a while we got so many requests that I was doing more interviews than I could get in the paper because it was a weekly column.
Right.
So you just listen. It was, you ask open-ended questions. You got them to start talking about things that they were up to, and you'd have a few notes because there were a few things you really wanted to get in. But what happens is you listen to the way they talked, and when you translate that into fiction, all your characters have a particular style of speaking. There was a woman, and this kid hit home. One column I was writing on this woman from Boonton, New Jersey. Her family helped found the town. Her neighborhood is now under the Jersey City Reservoir. She got involved with the veterans groups in town, wrote for a local newspaper, headed the Historic Society, and had a resume that was 3 feet long. And I was sitting there thinking, how do I boil that down to 1,200 words? Because there's just so much life. So I started listening to the tape again, and I realized that she said the name of her town correctly. It's Boonton with an N. It's spelled Boonton. Everybody else pronounced it Booton, Bootn. And that was the lead for the column, is that it was, she pronounces her hometown's name with an N, and that gave the framework for the rest of the column. And that's an experience that you don't get everywhere unless you're ready to listen. You learn to listen. You learn to expand and view, because you have to be able to create a setting for people who weren't there. So.
Wow. You know what I always find writing being such a fascinating thing, because you have to capture that audience, you know, and keep them engaged all the time. Because right now I'm engaged because you're talking to me. But if I'm sitting in a room and having a book in front of me, you have to capture them for them to make sure that they turn that next page.
Yeah,
That's
you do.
extraordinary. It really is.
It's something that you, and the thing that most of the people that I worked with in the newspaper business understood is that the people who were reading our stories did not sit in that courtroom. They weren't standing along the side of the road watching the fire department put the fire out. They didn't go to the council meeting. They didn't talk to people on the street. So you had to craft the story so that an audience who wasn't there could understand what you saw. And do it in a neutral way so that the description and the action of the story was what they would read, not your you could write opinion pieces later, but for writing a news story, you had to describe. I was assigned one night. There was a gas explosion up in Newton, up in Sussex County. It was this wonderful scene. They had a propane truck, 5,000 gallons of propane, that was leaking. The guy had backed it up and was gonna, he had loaded it up and he didn't unhook it correctly. So the gas was leaking out and they evacuated the immediate area. And I was sent up there, this was with my cell phone, which was dying, and I had to call in every 15 minutes because we were doing a rolling update of this thing. So I had to describe what was going on, had to throw in whatever interviews that I had, and then later, once they got the scene cleared and they held a press conference to announce what was going on, I had to write the story over the phone. So you develop a facility to tell stories automatically and instantly. And because you don't have time to think about it, you know
almost
that you
have to tell like the smell of it and description and
yeah, it was great because they had to let all the gas vent before they could move the truck because they knew that any kind of a spark was going to set it off. So people a half a mile away were being told to put out their cigarettes.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Hey, I don't even like lighting my grill. I mean, I'm serious. Propane gas is very bad.
Yeah, it didn't help. It was February and it was cold.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the right shoes for it, and I'm out there wandering around the street. I kept wandering around trying to get back across to the other side. I kept running into state cops who were saying, "No, you can't go there." Going, well, how? Direct me. How can I get back over there? But they understood. They saw that I was a reporter, and they weren't too picky about it. But they just said, "Don't go that way because you're going to walk right into the danger zone." I said, "Well, I'll try to avoid that if I can."
Wow. So Mike, we have to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to get into your books and talk a little bit about that. We're going to be right back after this commercial break.
Hi, my name's Casey Price, host of a brand new show called Everyday Elder Care. My show will help you take the stress out of caring for your elderly loved one by educating you about options and solutions you may not even know exist. Tune in every Tuesday at noon on RVN TV. We'll see you there.
Imagine the finest hand-selected USDA prime steak you'll ever have. The freshest line-caught seafood, our Wine Spectator award-winning wine list, and soul-satisfying desserts. Bring that together with the perfect date, the winning business deal, a memorable family celebration. Welcome to Rod's Steak and Seafood Grill in nearby Morristown, New Jersey. Bring your appetite and feed your passion.
For independent living for seniors age 62 and over, People Inc. offers safe, maintenance-free apartments across Western New York. The affordable rent is income-based. For more information, call People Inc. Senior Living at 817-9090.
In a world where bankers have lost all interest, where robots and fat cats rule our fortunes, one woman will stand up and strive to do the impossible. Be treated like a person. Friends and neighbors will join her quest. Ordinary people will band together against the forces of corporate greed. And together they will form Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, already in a neighborhood near you.
Assurance. It's a word, a touch, a look that sparks a feeling. Peace of mind that everything will be all right. These are the moments that inspire us to do more than you'd ever expect from a car insurance company at a price that's less than you'd expect. This is more than just insurance. This is Plymouth Rock Assurance. Visit us at PlymouthRock.com.
Welcome back. I'm Keith Reynolds, and I am hosting Breakfast with the Boss this morning. Scott Tankard's out, and we'll see him next week. But we have a great guest here. We have Michael Daigle, who is an author, and as you just saw, those are two of the books, two of the three that we're going to be talking about today. So, Michael, welcome to the show. So let's pick up from our last segment, and we want to get into the book. So we want to talk about Swamps of New Jersey, or Swamps of Jersey, it's called.
The history of these is that I wrote the first version of this whole series back when I was about 22.
Okay.
And actually, the title of the first one was A Game Called Dead. When I went to rewrite it, the story took a left turn and became The Swamps of Jersey. I relocated it from New York to New Jersey, and new characters showed up. This is a mystery series that's set in a fictional town called Ironton, New Jersey, which is a larger and fictional version of Dover, New Jersey, an old industrial town in Morris County. And I expanded it to include, the real Dover is 2 square miles and it's not physically big enough. So I've kind of liberally used other parts of Morris County to incorporate in the town. The central character is a detective named Frank Nagler. He's middle-aged. In the first version of the book, he was retired, and because that 22, that made perfect sense to me. In the other versions, I took off about 30 years. He's 40-ish, but his wife died when she was 22, and as he admits in the Swamps of Jersey, he buried his grief in his police work. So he's marginally miserable. He's probably depressed. He's irascible. He's pretty much a loner, but he is a good cop. He knows how to solve crimes. The Swamps of Jersey opens with, and also the other important thing with all 3 books is I use Ironton as a character. I spent a lot of time creating the landscape to give Nagler a way to play off the city that has bad parts, has some parts that are growing, and all of those factors influence the stories, but also influence how he reacts to the police investigation in front of him. In the Swamps of Jersey, it opens up with the economically depressed town getting hit by a tropical storm. Streets are flooded. People are living in the high school because their houses are underwater. Factories are there. The buildings are collapsing. There's water everywhere. The town doesn't know what to do, and they're just trying to survive. And I created in the first few pages of the Swamps of Jersey a theme that carries through other of the books. This is a vague description of living hell. There's a phrase in there about broken spotlights banging against buildings, sounding like cathedral bells at the end of time. And you describe this massively destructive storm and what it's done to the town, and in the middle of it, Frank Nagler, driving to a crime scene, tells a Noah joke, because that's what he does. So the swamps of the title comes from a place I created called the Old Iron Bog. In real life, the Rockaways Town Square Mall off Route 80
familiar with that.
was built over a swamp.
Yeah.
Swamps are more fun than shopping centers, so I eliminated the shopping center. And it provides a touchstone. It's a place that Nagler goes back to through all three books to think and ask questions. It's sort of his sounding board. It makes him act a little weirdly at times, but he goes out there. And in the first book that I'm writing, which actually takes place before the Swamps of Jersey, I was just writing a scene, and one of the people in the writing group and he said, I'm glad that you added details, because I put some stuff in there that helps explain why he goes to the bog. It's where he and his wife used to go out and make out when they were in high school.
Nice.
It's a place that, and actually in real life, I know people who grew up around that area who used to go fishing in the swamp. I mean, because it just is.
Yeah, and you know, for you viewers that are not in New Jersey, Jersey does have swamps. And you know what? North Jersey does flood. Like, what was up the Hackensack? Hackensack floods, and yes, water is up above the homes, the doorways.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's pretty cool. Well, it's not cool for them, but, you know, for the description in the book, yes, this does happen. So, okay.
And the other continuing theme in all three books is the conflict between the haves and the have-nots. The criminals in all three books presume that they have the power to control what's going on. In the Swamps of Jersey, it's politicians and corrupt businessmen. In a game called Dead, it's a guy who develops a megalomaniac personality who becomes a terrorist. And
so hold that thought one second. So where can we get this book at?
These are all available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online. We're trying to get them into bookstores. It's harder than it seems.
Okay.
But they are available in both paperback and ebook form on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a Canadian site called Kobo. You can get them on iBooks and Walmart.com of all places.
No, that's no. So briefly, I want to talk about the game called Dead.
Yeah.
Okay, because you just mentioned it. So tell us a little bit about this book here.
In this was in the series. This was the first book I wrote when I was 24, and it all begins with a police item in the newspaper. There was a break-in at a college. Somebody walked in on a weekend that the college was empty, stole cash, jewelry, little things that they could go fence. It was never caught. So I wrote a 8-paragraph story about that. You know, this is what, and then I looked at it and said, okay, what happens if he runs into somebody? So I wrote another version, and I used this in, I think two of the books as a way to describe the crime scheme. It's that you have character A and character B, and somehow they meet at point C. They don't know each other. They know nothing about each other. There's no reason for them to do it other than they are just put in the same place at the same time, and then what happens? And in the first version of a game called Dead, and it carries through this. The title comes from a video game that the college kids are playing. It's sort of a hunt and search, sort of Dungeons and Dragons type of game.
Right.
It becomes a real life game. They start dressing in costumes and chasing each other around campus and through the city and all of that. What happens is that the villain, who calls himself #Armageddon in the rewrite, takes control of the game. And you don't know who the players are, whether this stuff is real, whether it's not, and the story is structured as if it's a game. There are rules. There are side A and side B. Each side is changing the rules because they're trying to figure out how to gain the advantage for the other side. And Armageddon at one point emails the cops and says, "Look, guys, I've been trying to teach you how to play this game, but you're not learning it fast enough. And the longer you take, the more people will die. Every death is a lesson. Come on, get with it." What he doesn't understand is that the cops, very quietly, are setting up their own rules. And he's being herded down the cattle chute so that there's an inevitable end. And in a game called Dead, the end comes during the citywide protest about the economics of the town. The head of the local community center holds up a shovel and says, "This is a shovel. You guys who want to rebuild the town of Ironton should ask us. This is a shovel. We know how to use a shovel. We did it before. We built this town with shovels. Let's go down to town hall and give them shovels." And so there's thousands of people marching through the streets. Meanwhile, there's cops running all over the place trying to get Armageddon to take the bait. And Nagler is out there visibly because he knows he's the target. He's trying to draw this guy in. So you've got this huge citywide protest going on, and you've got the cop action interspersed through the whole thing. It was a great scene to write. It was great fun, and it reads really well. It's very cinematic. It's fun.
Cool. It
Very
sounds
much
good.
fun.
Like I said, like, you know what? As you're talking, I'm imagining a movie. You know what I mean? Like I said. So listen, we only have a couple more minutes left, but let's just take a look at this third book we have here, The Weight of Living.
Yeah.
Okay. Now tell me what that was about.
This is a dark story that moves Nagler beyond parts of what the other two are. It involves the discovery at the beginning of a young girl standing in a grocery store dumpster. She's wearing a tank top and shorts and no shoes. It's March, it's cold. The cops think she's homeless, and so they immediately start looking for homeless people. And all of that scene is described 3 or 4 different times through the whole story. I tried to imagine the most evil villain I could, and he's a really bad guy. He's manipulative. He's Machiavelli on a bad day. He's pulling strings. He gets people to do things for them for no reason, and he hurts, damages lots of people. So you've got this really horrible person who's created a lot of damage for other characters, including a nun who literally came out of nowhere. I hadn't planned that she was going to be in the story, but I was writing a scene that was supposed to be a quick transition to move from all of this stuff to all of this stuff. And I expected the social worker to step out of the courtroom, and who steps out was Sister Catherine. She's 90. She knew Frank Nagler growing up as a kid. She used to tell his mother about all the stuff he did in school, and just for fun she calls him Francis, and it drives him crazy. And she's got a cane, and periodically she just whacks him in the shins. And the story is about Nagler realizes that what has to happen here is he can't worry about himself. He has to catch this guy to put people on a way to heal. And the story ends very abruptly. And the woman who does the copy editing for my publisher, Nimzadi Publishing from Tulsa, when she sent me back the proof, she said, "Did you send me the whole story? Did you leave out a chapter?" And I said, "No." And I explained to her why it was, because I knew what the last line was going to be. I thought that Frank Nagler would say it. It was said to him by another character, and that's simply the process that you go through. Sometimes things change. Right. You have to be willing to roll with the change that shows up. The book, I was very grateful to find out that it won a first place award in a national mystery writing contest. The cover design won a gold medal from another website. It's the covers. The covers are done by Anita Dugan Moore, who's the graphic artist for my publisher. just thrilled that she won. We had a lot of fun designing this because her first version of the cover wasn't what I thought it was going to be. She in fact had a dumpster, and I didn't think that quite worked. So I gave her two passages from the book, one that described the girl's blank face, and the other one that described a scene where Sister Catherine, after she explains her role in all of this, begins to weep. And
Right.
the line is something like, the tears that had gathered on her eyes rolled down her perfect lined face.
Wow.
And that's the image that she created.
Okay.
It's dark.
So we have, you know what, we could talk for another hour on these. So do me a favor, look out at the camera and let them know where they can find you, the books again, and go ahead.
Sure. Hi. I have a website. It's called it's www.michaelstephendaigle.com. STEPHEN. You can find me on Amazon. I'm on Twitter, and I don't know the handles. I'm barely computer literate some days. The books are available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iBooks, and Walmart.com. My email address is michaelstephendaigle@hotmail.com, and my phone number is 908-619-6393. And I appreciate greatly the opportunity to come and talk about the books. They're fun. I wrote them, and I'll tell you, I think they're pretty good. You know.
Awesome. Okay. So, Michael, thank you so much for coming on to the
Thank you.
show. For you viewers and listeners out there, as Michael said, here's the 3 books. Please make sure you check them out at those locations and online spots for it. And we're going to be right back with more Morning Coffee. We have Off the Mat with Lori Andriaki. We'll be right up after this.